My sister tried to humiliate us at dinner, but we ended up with a VIP meal while she watched in jealous silence. My name is Marcus, and I'm 38 years old. For most of my life, I've been what people call a peacekeeper. The kind of person who smooths over conflicts, who apologizes first even when I'm not wrong, who lets things slide because confrontation makes my stomach twist into knots. But there comes a moment in every person's life when being quiet stops being peaceful and starts being self-destruction. This is the story of how I found that moment, and how one dinner party became the catalyst for everything that followed. My sister Victoria is 41. To the outside world, she's everything you'd want in an older sibling. Successful, well-dressed, married to a dentist named Gregory, living in a pristine colonial house in the suburbs with their 2 children. She volunteers at the country club. She hosts charity brunches. Her Instagram feed looks like it was curated by a lifestyle magazine editor. But beneath that polished exterior is something I've spent decades trying to ignore, a calculating cruelty that she wields like a scalpel, precise and devastating. Growing up, Victoria was always Mom's favorite. It wasn't even subtle. Mom would beam when Victoria brought home report cards, even though my grades were just as good. Victoria got the new clothes while I got hand-me-downs from cousins. When Victoria wanted piano lessons, Mom found the money. When I asked for art supplies, suddenly the budget was too tight. Dad was different. He saw both of us clearly, but Dad died 4 years ago from a sudden heart attack, and with him went the only buffer I had against Victoria's particular brand of family politics. The thing about Victoria is that she never attacks directly. She's too smart for that. Instead, she excludes. She forgets. She makes decisions that somehow always leave me on the outside looking in, and when I try to bring it up, I'm being sensitive or reading too much into things. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts, and the worst part is that everyone around her thinks she's wonderful. I have a daughter named Riley. She's 14, smart as a whip, with her mother's dark curls and my tendency to lose myself in creative projects. Riley is my world. Her mom, Jessica, and I divorced 6 years ago. It was amicable, as much as divorce can be, and we share custody. But Riley's always been my anchor, the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I keep pushing through even when Victoria's latest slight makes me want to disappear. The incident that changed everything started with a text message. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September. I was at my graphic design studio, a small converted garage space I rent in the Arts District, working on a logo for a local coffee roaster when my phone buzzed. Marcus. Big news. Gregory got a huge promotion at the practice. Partner track. We're celebrating with a family dinner this Saturday at Nouveau. You know, that French place downtown that just got written up in the Times? You and Riley should come. 6 p.m. Dress nice. It's formal. Can't wait. Zoxo, V. I stared at the message for a long moment. Nouveau was one of those restaurants where you needed a reservation weeks in advance, where entrees started at $45 and the wine list was bound in leather. It wasn't Victoria's usual choice. She typically preferred country club dining rooms or trendy bistros where she could be seen by the right people. This felt different, bigger, more deliberate. But the invitation seemed genuine. She'd included Riley and me. She'd used exclamation points. Maybe, I thought, maybe this was Victoria trying to rebuild something between us. Maybe Gregory's success had put her in a generous mood. Maybe I was finally going to stop being the forgotten younger brother. I texted back, "Congratulations to Gregory. We'll be there. Should I bring anything?" Her response came immediately. "Just yourselves. See you Saturday." Riley was excited when I told her. She loved getting dressed up, and she rarely got to go to fancy restaurants. We spent Thursday evening shopping for a new dress for her. She picked out a navy blue one with a subtle floral pattern that made her look older than 14, and I pulled out the one suit I owned that didn't have a coffee stain on the sleeve. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather. Riley was nervous about seeing her cousins, Victoria's kids, Brandon and Madison, who were 16 and 12 respectively. They weren't mean to Riley exactly, but they inhabited a different social stratum, one where everything was carefully curated and judged. Still, Riley was determined to make a good impression. We arrived at Nouveau at 6 o'clock exactly. The restaurant was stunning, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, with an open kitchen where chefs in white coats worked with choreographed precision. A host in a sharp vest greeted us at the door. "Reservation name?" he asked. "We're with the Patterson party," I said. "Victoria Patterson." He checked his tablet, then nodded. "Ah yes, the private dining room. Right this way." He led us through the main dining area and down a short corridor to a set of frosted glass doors. Beyond them was a gorgeous private room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a long table set with what looked like 50 pieces of silverware per setting, and candles everywhere. It was breathtaking. It was also completely full. Victoria stood at the head of the table in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my rent. Gregory was beside her, looking pleased with himself in a navy suit. Brandon and Madison were there, along with what looked like 4 other couples I didn't recognize, probably Gregory's colleagues and their spouses. Every seat at the table had a place card. None of them had our names. I stood in the doorway with Riley, my stomach dropping as I quickly counted. 12 chairs. 12 place settings. 12 people already seated or standing near their assigned spots. Victoria looked up and saw us, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Not surprise. Something else. Satisfaction, maybe. Marcus, she said, her voice bright and carrying. You made it. Of course we made it, I said, trying to keep my tone light even as my pulse started to race. You invited us. Yes, well, I'm so glad you could come by, she said, and that phrasing, come by, sent a chill down my spine. Although I have to say, this is really more of a professional celebration. Gregory's partners and their families. You understand. I looked at the table again. Every seat occupied or claimed. No space for Riley and me. Victoria, I said carefully, your text said it was a family dinner. You invited us specifically. Did I? She tilted her head, her expression one of practiced confusion. I thought I mentioned it was a work thing. Anyway, the restaurant has other seating. You're welcome to grab dinner in the main dining room if you'd like. It's supposed to be excellent. Riley's hand found mine, and I could feel her trembling slightly. She understood what was happening even if she couldn't articulate it. We'd been invited to drive across town, to dress up, to show up at an expensive restaurant, only to be told we weren't actually wanted at the table. Gregory appeared at Victoria's shoulder. Marcus, hey, good to see you, he said with a kind of jovial tone that suggested he was completely oblivious to the tension. Yeah, sorry about the confusion. The private room has a capacity thing, you know? Fire marshal regulations and all that. But the food here is supposed to be incredible. You guys should definitely stay and eat. We were invited, I said again, and I hated how my voice sounded, small and defensive. Victoria sent me a text specifically inviting Riley and me to a family celebration. Well, I mean, it is a celebration, Victoria said, waving her hand vaguely. But it's primarily for Gregory's partners. You know how these professional things are. Very political. We had to be selective about the guest list. Selective. The word hung in the air like smoke. One of the couples at the table, a woman in a black cocktail dress, was watching us with obvious discomfort. Another man was studying his phone with exaggerated interest. Brandon and Madison just looked awkward, which was probably the most human reaction in the room. I could have pushed back. I could have shown Victoria the text message, could have made her explain why she'd said family dinner if she meant work dinner, could have pointed out that there were clearly seats that had been deliberately limited to exclude us. But standing there with Riley's hand in mine, with a dozen strangers watching, I couldn't do it. The confrontation I'd rehearsed in my head 1,000 times evaporated. Come on, Riley, I said quietly. Let's find another table. Marcus, don't be dramatic, Victoria called after us, but we were already walking back toward the main dining room. Riley was crying silently by the time we reached the host stand. Not big, gulping sobs, she was too self-conscious for that in public, but tears were tracking down her cheeks, and she kept wiping them away with the back of her hand. Dad, I don't understand, she whispered. Why would Aunt Victoria do that? I didn't have an answer. Or rather, I had too many answers, none of which I could say to my 14-year-old daughter. Because Victoria has always needed to prove she's better than me. Because excluding people makes her feel powerful. Because she's spent our entire lives making sure I know my place, and that place is beneath her. The host who'd shown us to the private room approached with a concerned expression. His name tag read, Carlos, manager. Is everything all right? He asked, his voice low and professional. We're fine, I started to say, but Riley cut me off. No, we're not fine, she said, her voice shaking but firm. We were invited to a family dinner, but when we got here, they said there wasn't room for us. They didn't even try to make space. They just wanted us to know we weren't wanted. Out of the mouths of children. Riley had articulated in 2 sentences what I'd been dancing around for my entire adult life. Carlos looked between us, his expression shifting from professional concern to something deeper, understanding, maybe, or recognition. I see, he said quietly. May I ask your names? Marcus Chen. This is my daughter Riley. Mr. Chen, Riley, Carlos said, I apologize that you've had this experience in our establishment. That's not the kind of evening we want anyone to have here. Would you allow me to make this right? We can just go, I said. We don't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble, Carlos said firmly. Your family member caused trouble by inviting you under false pretenses. But you're here now, you're dressed beautifully, and you deserve to have a memorable evening. Please, give me just a few minutes. He disappeared before I could protest further. Riley and I stood near the host stand, and I could feel the weight of other diners' glances. We were that table, the family drama playing out in public, the people who didn't belong. Carlos returned 5 minutes later with a woman who introduced herself as Michelle, the restaurant's owner. She was in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Mr. Chen, Riley, Michelle said, shaking both our hands. Carlos has explained the situation. I want to offer you our chef's table. It's normally reserved for special guests and food critics, but tonight I think you both qualify as special guests. We can't afford, I started, but Michelle held up a hand. Tonight, the chef's table is complimentary, she said. Consider it our apology for how you were treated upon arrival. We believe every guest deserves respect and dignity, and that includes guests whose family members forget that principle. The chef's table turned out to be an intimate booth near the kitchen, positioned so we could watch the culinary team work but separate enough to feel private. It was upholstered in deep green velvet, and the table itself was a gorgeous live-edge wood slab. A single candle flickered in a brass holder. This is amazing, Riley breathed, her tears drying as she looked around. Carlos himself served as our waiter, and he treated us like visiting dignitaries. He brought warm sourdough bread with cultured butter, explained each dish with genuine enthusiasm, and made sure Riley felt included and valued. When the sommelier came by, Carlos quietly suggested a sparkling grape juice for Riley that came in a wine glass, making her feel grown up and special. The food was extraordinary. We started with a butter lettuce salad with shaved radishes and edible flowers, followed by pan-seared scallops that melted in our mouths. For the main course, I had duck breast with cherry gastrique, while Riley chose a perfectly cooked fillet with roasted baby vegetables. Every bite felt like an apology the restaurant was making on behalf of my sister's cruelty. But what made the evening transcendent wasn't the food, it was Riley. Sitting across from her, watching her slowly relax and smile, seeing her animation return as she told me about school and her friends and the graphic novel she was working on, I realized something. For years, I'd accepted Victoria's treatment because I thought avoiding conflict was the same as keeping peace. But in doing so, I'd modeled for Riley that it was okay to accept disrespect, that family meant enduring cruelty and silence, that asking for basic dignity was somehow causing drama. That ended tonight. Dad, Riley said as we finished our entrees, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. Why do you let Aunt Victoria treat you like that? The question hit me like cold water. What do you mean? You know what I mean, Riley said, and there was no accusation in her voice, just genuine curiosity. She forgets your birthday. She doesn't invite you to family stuff, or if she does, it's like tonight where she makes it clear you're not really wanted. Grandma always takes her side. And you just let it happen. I wanted to defend myself, to explain the complexity of sibling dynamics, to talk about choosing battles and family harmony. But Riley's eyes were so clear, so honest, and I couldn't lie to her. You're right, I said finally. I do let it happen. I've let it happen for a long time. But why? Because I thought that was what you did in families, I said. You endured. You forgave. You kept showing up because that's what family means. But you know what? I think I've been wrong. I think I've been confusing peace with surrender. Riley reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I don't want to go to Aunt Victoria's house anymore, she said quietly. I know she's family, but she makes you sad. She makes me feel invisible. I don't think that's what family is supposed to feel like. And there it was. My 14-year-old daughter had more clarity about toxic relationships than I'd managed to develop in 38 years. You're absolutely right, I said. And things are going to change. I promise. At that moment, Carlos appeared with a broad smile. I hope you saved room for dessert, he said. Oh, we probably shouldn't, I began, but Carlos was already gesturing to the kitchen. Two pastry chefs emerged carrying what could only be described as an architectural masterpiece. It was a three-tiered chocolate construction with spun sugar spirals, fresh berries, gold leaf accents, and what looked like house-made ice cream in several flavors. It was easily twice the size of any dessert I'd seen on other tables. This is our chef's signature celebration dessert, Carlos explained as they set it down. Typically reserved for anniversaries and proposals. But Michelle and I agreed that tonight, you two are celebrating something more important, the refusal to accept disrespect. Riley's eyes went wide. This is for us? Every bite, Carlos confirmed. And before you worry about the cost, let me be clear, tonight's entire meal is on the house. Michelle insists. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. We can't accept, Mr. Chen, Carlos said gently. Sometimes the universe puts us in a position to do something right when something wrong has been done. Let us do this right thing. Please. The dessert was phenomenal. Dark chocolate mousse, vanilla bean panna cotta, caramel sauce, fresh whipped cream, and 4 different types of berries. Riley and I ate slowly, savoring each element, and with every bite I felt something shifting inside me. This was what being valued felt like. This was what respect looked like. And I'd been living without it for so long that I'd forgotten what it tasted like. About halfway through our dessert, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. Victoria had emerged from the private dining room and was standing near the bar area, talking to Gregory. She kept glancing in our direction, and her expression was hard to read. Surprise, maybe, mixed with something darker. Annoyance. Possibly envy. Gregory said something to her, and she shook her head sharply. Then she started walking toward our table. Dad, Riley said nervously, noticing her approach. It's okay, I said, though I wasn't sure it was. Victoria stopped at our table, her gaze taking in the elaborate dessert, the elegant booth, the obvious preferential treatment we were receiving. Marcus, she said, her tone attempting casual but missing by a mile. Having a nice dinner? Exceptional, actually, I said. Good, good. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to explain about the seating situation. The private room really did hit capacity, and Gregory's partners were very specific about who needed to be there. You understand, work politics are complicated. Victoria, I said calmly, you texted me and specifically said, family dinner. Not work dinner. Not professional obligation. Family dinner. You invited Riley and me by name. Well, yes, but, and when we arrived, not only was there no space for us, you didn't even apologize. You acted like we should have known better than to expect to actually join the celebration you invited us to. Her smile froze. Marcus, you're being dramatic. I was trying to include you. No, I said, and the word came out firmer than I'd ever spoken to her before. You were trying to remind me of my place. You wanted me to show up, to see you and Gregory being celebrated by important people, and to know that I wasn't important enough to be included. You wanted me to feel small. And you know what? It worked. For about 20 minutes, it worked. Victoria's face went red. How dare you? But then something interesting happened, I continued. The staff here, people who don't even know us, showed us more kindness and respect in 2 hours than you've shown me in 2 years. They gave us this beautiful space, prepared this incredible meal, treated Riley like she matters. And they did all of that because they recognized that what you did was wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, Victoria hissed, her voice low but vicious. You're always so sensitive, Marcus. Always looking for ways to be the victim. Maybe if you'd made something of yourself like Gregory and I have, you'd understand how these professional situations work. Riley's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. Made something of myself? I repeated quietly. Victoria, I run my own design studio. I'm raising an incredible daughter. I pay my bills, I help my clients, I create things that matter to people. The fact that I don't have your country club membership or Gregory's salary doesn't mean I haven't made something of my life. Oh, please, I'm done, I said simply. I'm done showing up to be excluded. I'm done hoping you'll change. I'm done explaining to my daughter why her aunt treats us like we're disposable. You want a relationship with me and Riley? Then you need to do the work to repair what you've broken. But I'm not going to keep breaking myself trying to fit into spaces you don't want me in. Victoria stared at me like I'd slapped her. In all our years of sibling conflict, I'd never pushed back like this. I'd never drawn a line. Fine, she said finally, her voice tight. If that's how you feel. That's how I feel. She turned and walked back toward the private dining room, her shoulders rigid with anger. Gregory caught her arm as she passed, asking a question I couldn't hear. She shook her head sharply and disappeared back through the frosted glass doors. I realized I was shaking. Dad, Riley said softly, that was amazing. Was it? I asked. Because I feel like I'm going to throw up. You stood up for us, she said. You told her the truth. I've never seen you do that before. Carlos appeared a moment later with a knowing look. Everything all right? Better than all right, I said, though my voice was unsteady. Carlos, Michelle, I need to know how to properly thank you for tonight. By coming back, Carlos said simply. By continuing to live your life with dignity and joy. That's all the thanks we need. We finished our dessert slowly, letting the adrenaline fade. When we finally stood to leave, Carlos walked us to the door personally. Mr. Chen, he said as we reached the exit, I've worked in restaurants for 20 years. I've seen every kind of family drama you can imagine. What your sister did tonight, that wasn't about seating capacity or work obligations. That was about power and control. You disrupted her script by refusing to leave, by staying and enjoying yourself despite her intentions. That took courage. It took desperation, I admitted. Sometimes those are the same thing, Carlos said with a slight smile. The important thing is what you do next. Don't let tonight be an aberration. Let it be a turning point. As Riley and I walked to the car, the city lights reflected off wet pavement from an earlier rain. The air smelled like autumn and possibility. What are we going to do about Aunt Victoria? Riley asked as we pulled onto the highway. We're going to do exactly what we said, I told her. We're going to set boundaries. We're going to demand respect. And if she can't give us those things, then we're going to build a life that doesn't require her approval. Riley was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Good. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and a flood of text messages. Most were from Victoria, ranging from defensive, I can't believe you made such a scene at Gregory's celebration, to accusatory, Mom says you were incredibly rude to me, to vaguely threatening, don't think this won't have consequences for your relationship with the family. There were also messages from Mom. Marcus, Victoria is very upset. She says you embarrassed her in front of Gregory's colleagues. This is why I've always said you need to think before you speak. Call me. I sat with my phone for a long time, reading and rereading the messages. A month ago, hell, a week ago, I would have immediately called to apologize. I would have explained and justified and done whatever it took to smooth things over. But sitting there in my small apartment, watching Riley sleep peacefully in the next room, I realized I didn't want to smooth anything over. I wanted it to be rough. I wanted the truth to have sharp edges. I wrote one message to Victoria: I won't apologize for refusing to accept disrespect. If you'd like to have an honest conversation about our relationship and how we treat each other, I'm open to that. But I won't pretend that what happened last night was acceptable. To Mom, I wrote, I'm sorry Victoria is upset. However, she invited Riley and me to dinner and then deliberately excluded us. I'm not willing to apologize for advocating for myself and my daughter. Then I turned my phone off and made pancakes for Riley. The week that followed was surprisingly peaceful. Without the constant anxiety of waiting for Victoria's next slight or Mom's next guilt trip, I felt like I could breathe deeper. Riley and I fell into a routine: homework after school, dinners where we actually talked, weekend art projects where we worked side by side on our respective creative pursuits. I'd started drawing again, something I'd abandoned when the demands of single parenthood and running a business took over all my free time. But sitting at my drafting table, pencil in hand, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with art in the first place. It was meditation. It was control. It was creating something beautiful from nothing. Riley noticed. Your stuff is really good, Dad, she said one evening, looking at a portrait sketch I'd done of a woman in the park. Have you thought about selling it? Who'd buy drawings from a graphic designer? I said, but the question planted a seed. That weekend, I set up an Instagram account for my art. Nothing fancy, just clean shots of my sketches and paintings, with simple captions about what had inspired each piece. I posted a few pieces and forgot about it. By Monday, I had 200 followers and 3 commission requests. By the end of the month, I had over 2,000 followers and a waiting list of people who wanted custom portraits. The income wasn't enough to quit my day job, but it was enough to matter. More importantly, it reminded me that I had value beyond Victoria's approval, beyond Mom's favoritism, beyond the family dynamics that had defined me for so long. Riley thrived too. Without the anxiety of dreading family gatherings or navigating her aunt's subtle condescension, she seemed lighter. Her grades improved. She joined the art club at school. She talked about her future with excitement rather than vague uncertainty. Mom called occasionally, always with the same message. Victoria was hurt, the family was fractured, couldn't I just apologize and move on? I started letting the calls go to voicemail. When I did answer, I kept my responses consistent. I'm open to reconciliation, but it has to include acknowledging what happened and committing to change. I'm not interested in pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Then, 6 weeks after the dinner incident, Victoria sent me a new message. This one was different in tone, less accusatory, more carefully constructed. Marcus, I think we should talk. I'm hosting a small birthday dinner for Mom at my house next Saturday. Just family. I'd like you and Riley to come. It would mean a lot to Mom. Can we put our disagreement aside for one evening? For her sake. I stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct I developed over 38 years told me to say yes, to show up, to try again. But I'd learned something in the past 6 weeks. Patterns don't break themselves. I called Mom directly. She answered on the second ring. Marcus, I'm so glad you called. Victoria told me she invited you to my birthday dinner. She did, I confirmed. But before I answer, I need to understand something. Do you know what happened at Gregory's celebration dinner? There was a pause. Victoria said there was a misunderstanding about the seating. Mom, Victoria invited Riley and me to what she explicitly called a family dinner. When we arrived, there was no space for us at the table. She had deliberately organized it so we'd be excluded, then acted like we should have known better than to expect to be included. Another pause, longer this time. Well, Marcus, these professional dinners can be complicated. I'm sure Victoria didn't mean, Mom, I need you to hear this, I said, my voice steady but firm. Victoria meant exactly what happened. And when I tried to address it, she dismissed my feelings and blamed me for being too sensitive. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm asking you to acknowledge that what she did was hurtful and wrong. Marcus, you know how Victoria is. She gets focused on things, and sometimes she's not as thoughtful as she could be. But she's your sister. Family means forgiving these little slights. Little slights, I repeated. Mom, this has been happening my entire life. Victoria excludes me, forgets me, dismisses me. And every time I try to talk about it, you tell me I'm being too sensitive or that I need to understand her better. When does she need to understand me? I just think you're making this into something bigger than it needs to be, Mom said, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice. She wanted this conversation to be over. She wanted me to be the peacekeeper again. I'll come to your birthday dinner, I said, but only if Victoria can promise that Riley and I will be treated as valued guests, not afterthoughts. And I need you to support that boundary, not undermine it. Of course you'll be valued guests, Mom said, too quickly. It's just family. Why wouldn't you be? I knew then that nothing had changed. Victoria hadn't learned anything. Mom wasn't going to support me. The family system that had marginalized me for decades was still fully operational. But I had changed. And that made all the difference. I'll think about it, I told Mom. I'll let Victoria know by Wednesday. I spent the next 2 days thinking. I talked to Riley, who made her position clear. Dad, I don't want to go if Aunt Victoria is just going to be mean again. And Grandma always acts like everything you say is wrong. I'd rather stay home. I talked to my friend James, who'd been my college roommate and remained my most trusted confidant. Man, you don't owe them anything, he said. Family isn't a free pass to treat people like garbage. If they can't respect you, why are you still showing up? But there was something else at play. Something I couldn't quite articulate until I was sketching one evening and Riley asked, Dad, why do you want to go to Grandma's birthday if you know it's going to be bad? Because I need to know, I said slowly, the realization forming as I spoke. I need to know if things can be different, or if I need to accept that they'll never change and move on completely. Does that make sense? I think so, Riley said. You need closure. Closure. That was exactly it. I texted Victoria on Wednesday morning, Riley and I will come to Mom's birthday dinner. But I need your word that we'll be included in the actual celebration, not sidelined or made to feel like intruders. Her response came an hour later. Of course, Marcus. It's just family. See you Saturday at 5. Saturday arrived cold and overcast. Riley and I dressed nicely but not formally. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. We brought a gift for Mom, a beautiful scarf I'd found at a local artisan market. Victoria's house was exactly what you'd expect, perfectly landscaped, double doors, a chandelier visible through the foyer window. Gregory answered the door with a hearty, Marcus, Riley, come in, come in. The house smelled like roasted chicken and expensive candles. Mom was in the living room, surrounded by perfectly arranged flowers and wrapped gifts. Victoria emerged from the kitchen in a cashmere sweater and tailored pants, looking every inch the gracious hostess. Marcus, Riley, I'm so glad you could make it, she said, and her smile seemed genuine. Maybe, I thought, maybe she had reflected on what happened. Maybe this would be different. We moved into the dining room for dinner. The table was set for 8, Victoria and Gregory at the heads, Mom on one side with Brandon and Madison, and 3 empty seats on the other side. Riley and I took 2 of them. Is someone else coming? I asked, noting the 8th place setting. Oh, that's for Aunt Caroline, Mom said. She's running a bit late. Aunt Caroline was Mom's sister, a woman who'd never had children and had always treated Victoria and me with equal, if distant, affection. Her presence was neutral territory, which was probably strategic on Victoria's part. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Victoria had clearly put effort into the meal, roasted chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes, green beans, fresh bread. The conversation flowed around safe topics, Brandon's college applications, Madison's volleyball tournament, Gregory's recent golf game. But then Mom turned to me and said, So Marcus, how's the job hunt going? I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. Job hunt? Well, I know freelance design work can be inconsistent, Mom said in that particular tone that suggested she was being helpful rather than condescending. Victoria mentioned you might be looking for something more stable. I looked at Victoria, who was suddenly very interested in her dinner. I'm not job hunting, I said carefully. My design studio is doing well. I have more clients than I can handle, actually. Oh, Mom said, looking confused. Victoria said, I may have misunderstood, Victoria cut in smoothly. I thought you'd mentioned wanting more stability. No, I said, keeping my voice level. I've never said that. My business is stable. I'm also doing well with art commissions. I've built a pretty substantial following online. That's great, honey, Mom said in a tone that suggested it wasn't really that great. Although I do worry about you relying on hobbies for income. At your age, you really should be thinking about retirement savings and benefits. I have retirement savings, I said. And I'm doing what I love. Isn't that worth something? Of course it is, Victoria said quickly. Mom's just concerned about you, that's all. We all are. There it was. The subtle implication that I was someone to be concerned about, someone who needed management and guidance, someone who hadn't quite figured out how to be an adult. Riley's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. I appreciate the concern, I said, but it's misplaced. I'm doing well. Riley and I are doing well. The conversation moved on, but the damage was done. I could feel the familiar weight settling over me, the sense that no matter what I accomplished, it would never be enough to change their perception of me as the lesser sibling, the one who needed fixing. Dessert arrived, a beautiful birthday cake with "Happy 65th Birthday" written in elegant script. We sang, Mom blew out the candles, and Victoria began serving slices. That's when I noticed that Riley and I had been given noticeably smaller pieces than everyone else. It was subtle, probably not even something Riley noticed, but I saw it. Another small way of saying, "You matter less." I set down my fork. "Victoria," I said quietly, "can I talk to you in the kitchen for a moment?" She looked startled, but nodded. Of course. In the kitchen, away from the others, I turned to face her. "Why did you really invite us here?" "What do you mean? It's Mom's birthday." "Victoria, stop. Please just stop. You told Mom I was job hunting when I'm not. You gave Riley and me smaller cake portions. You've spent this entire evening making subtle digs about my career and my life choices. Why did you invite us if you were just going to do this again?" Her face hardened. "You know, Marcus, not everything is about you. Maybe I gave you smaller pieces because I know Riley doesn't like too much cake. Maybe Mom asked about your job because she's concerned. You're so busy being the victim that you can't see when people are just trying to help." "Help," I repeated flatly. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes, help. Look at yourself, Marcus. You're 38 years old, running a design studio out of a rented garage, doing art commissions on Instagram like you're still in college. Gregory and I have built something. We have a home, financial security, a future. We're trying to help you see that you could have that too if you just grow up." The words hung in the air between us. This was it, the truth beneath all the subtle exclusions and dismissals. Victoria didn't just think she was better than me. She genuinely believed I was failing at life, and that her cruelty was somehow helpful guidance. "I need you to understand something," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "I don't want your version of success. I don't want the big house or the country club membership or the need to constantly prove my worth through material possessions and social status. I want to create things. I want to spend time with my daughter. I want relationships built on respect, not power plays. And if you can't see the value in that, then we have nothing more to talk about." "How dare you? I'm not done," I said, and something in my tone made her stop. "You've spent our entire lives making me feel like I wasn't enough. Not smart enough, not successful enough, not important enough. And I let you, because I thought that's what family did. You accepted each other's flaws and loved anyway. But you know what I've realized? You don't see your behavior as a flaw. You see it as a virtue. You think you're helping me by reminding me of my inadequacies. But all you're doing is revealing your own insecurity." Victoria's face went white with anger. "Get out," she said coldly. "Get out of my house." "Gladly." I walked back to the dining room, where everyone had gone silent. They'd clearly heard at least part of the argument. "Riley," I said calmly, "get your coat. We're leaving." "Marcus, don't do this," Mom said, standing up. "It's my birthday. Can't you just set aside your differences for one evening?" "Mom," I said, "I've been setting aside my differences my entire life. I've swallowed every slight, ignored every exclusion, forgiven every dismissal. And you know what? It's never been enough. Victoria still treats me with contempt, and you still take her side. I'm done apologizing for expecting basic respect." "You're being dramatic," Victoria said from the kitchen doorway. "Maybe," I acknowledged. "Or maybe I'm finally being honest. Either way, Riley and I are leaving. Mom, happy birthday. I love you. But I can't keep participating in a family dynamic that requires me to accept being treated as less than." Riley and I left. No dramatic slammed doors, no shouted accusations. Just a quiet exit that somehow felt more final than any explosion could have been. In the car, Riley was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, are we going to see them again?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. But only if things change. And I don't think they're going to change." "That's okay," Riley said. "We'll be okay without them." And the stunning thing was, she was right. The weeks that followed were marked by silence from my family. No calls from Mom. No texts from Victoria. No attempts at reconciliation or understanding. Just silence, which spoke louder than any argument. But my life didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. My art commissions grew into something sustainable. I started teaching online classes in figure drawing and portraiture, which brought in additional income and connected me with a community of artists who appreciated my work. I sold several pieces through a local gallery. Riley and I attended art exhibitions and craft fairs together, building a shared language around creativity that filled the space left by family dinners and obligatory holiday gatherings. Riley blossomed. Her art improved dramatically. She started a comic series that got attention from her peers at school. She talked about art school in her future, about becoming an animator or graphic novelist. She was building an identity untethered from the limiting expectations of family legacy. I started seeing someone, a woman named Sophia who taught ceramics at the community center where I'd started teaching my drawing classes. She was kind and funny and direct in ways that Victoria's manipulation had never allowed for. Our relationship grew slowly, built on honesty rather than performance. 3 months after Mom's birthday dinner, I got a letter. Not an email or text, an actual letter, in Mom's handwriting, on her personalized stationery. Dear Marcus, it began. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at my birthday dinner. At first, I was angry and hurt. I felt like you were attacking Victoria and tearing apart our family. But I've had time to reflect, and I need to tell you something difficult. Your father saw all of this. Before he died, he talked to me several times about Victoria's treatment of you. He said I was enabling her behavior by always making excuses, by always asking you to be the bigger person. I didn't listen. I told him he was imagining problems where none existed. Now I wonder if he was right. I don't know how to fix what's broken between you and Victoria. I'm not sure it can be fixed. But I want you to know that I see you, Marcus. I see the life you've built, the father you are to Riley, the artist you've become. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I asked you to make yourself smaller so Victoria could feel bigger. You deserved better from me. Love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. It didn't erase decades of favoritism and dismissal. But it was acknowledgement, and that mattered more than I'd expected. I called Mom that evening. We talked for 2 hours, really talked, maybe for the first time in my adult life. She told me stories about Dad, about the conversations they'd had about Victoria and me, about his frustration with the family dynamics. She apologized, not in vague generalities but in specific acknowledgments of times she'd chosen Victoria's version of events over mine. What about Victoria? I asked finally. Have you talked to her about this? Mom sighed. I've tried. She's not ready to hear it. She thinks I'm being manipulated by your emotional outbursts. Her words, not mine. I don't know if she'll ever understand what she's done. That's not your responsibility to fix, I said. And it's not mine either. I know, Mom said. I wish your father was here. He would know what to say. We made plans to have lunch, just the 2 of us. It was a small step, but it felt significant. The letter from Victoria came 2 weeks later. It was shorter than Mom's and far less apologetic. Marcus, Mom says you're upset about how I've treated you over the years. I've given this a lot of thought, and while I'm sorry you feel hurt, I don't think I've done anything wrong. I've always tried to include you in family events and offer guidance when you seem to need it. If you perceive that as criticism or exclusion, that's a misunderstanding on your part. However, for Mom's sake and for the sake of family unity, I'm willing to move past our disagreement. I'm hosting Thanksgiving this year, and you and Riley are welcome to attend if you can commit to putting this unpleasantness behind us. Let me know by November 1st. Victoria. I showed the letter to Sophia, who read it with increasing incredulity. This is an apology, she asked. This is Victoria, I said. Acknowledging that I have feelings is as close as she gets to taking responsibility. Are you going to go? I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to try again, wanted to believe that something could shift. But I'd learned something important over the past few months. You can't force someone to respect you. You can only decide whether to keep putting yourself in situations where disrespect is guaranteed. No, I said finally. Riley and I will have our own Thanksgiving. Maybe we'll invite Mom. Maybe we'll go to a restaurant and create our own traditions. But we're not going to Victoria's. Riley, when I told her, looked relieved. Can we go back to that French place where the manager was so nice to us? I laughed. You know what? That's a great idea. I called Nouveau and asked for Carlos. When he came on the line, I explained what I wanted, a Thanksgiving reservation for 3, Riley, myself, and potentially my mother. Mr. Chen, Carlos said warmly, I remember you. That dessert was one of my favorite moments this year. Of course we can accommodate you. In fact, let me talk to Michelle. I think we can do something special. Thanksgiving Day arrived crisp and bright. Mom had accepted our invitation hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of skipping Victoria's house. But she showed up at our apartment that morning, and we drove downtown together. Nouveau was transformed for the holiday. Autumn wreaths on the doors, warm lighting, the scent of sage and roasted turkey filling the air. Carlos greeted us personally, leading us to the same booth where Riley and I had sat months ago. Michelle wanted you to know that today's meal is her gift to you, Carlos said. She believes in celebrating people who have the courage to break toxic patterns. The meal was extraordinary, a Thanksgiving feast reimagined through the lens of fine dining, with thoughtful touches that showed someone had remembered Riley's preferences from our last visit. Mom was quiet at first, clearly processing the strangeness of the situation. But as the meal progressed and she watched Riley's animation, watched me interact with the staff who treated us with genuine warmth and respect, something shifted in her expression. This is lovely, she said finally. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a holiday this much. Really? I asked, surprised. Really? she confirmed. There's always so much pressure at Victoria's. Everything has to be perfect, everyone has to play their role. This is... She gestured around at the restaurant, at our table, at the easy conversation. This is just pleasant. Just being together without all the performance. After dessert, a beautiful pumpkin tart with maple cream, Carlos approached with a small wrapped box. Michelle wanted you to have this, he said, handing it to Riley. She says every young artist deserves good tools. Riley opened it to find a professional-grade set of drawing pencils and a leather-bound sketchbook. Tell her thank you, Riley breathed. Tell her this is amazing. You can tell her yourself, Carlos said with a smile. She's right there. Michelle emerged from the kitchen, approaching our table with a warm smile. Riley, I've heard you're quite an artist. I thought you might appreciate tools that take you seriously. I love them, Riley said. Thank you so much. And Mr. Chen, Michelle said, turning to me, Carlos tells me you're teaching art classes now. If you ever want to teach a workshop here, pairing wine and art for adults, or something family-oriented, let us know. We'd love to host something that brings people together the way you and your daughter have inspired us. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. That would be amazing. Thank you. As we left the restaurant, Mom linked her arm through mine. You've built something good here, Marcus, she said. Something real. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Mom, I said. That means more than you know. Riley walked ahead of us, her new sketchbook clutched to her chest, already planning what she'd draw first. That was 2 years ago. Today, Riley is 16 and thriving. She's had several pieces featured in local art exhibitions. She runs an online shop selling prints of her comic art. She's confident and grounded in ways I never was at her age. I married Sophia last spring in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. Mom was there, as were a few close friends. Victoria was not invited, which was a deliberate choice neither Sophia nor I regretted. My art has grown from a side project into a legitimate career. I teach regular workshops at Nouveau, wine and watercolor has become their most popular monthly event, and I've had pieces commissioned by corporate clients and private collectors. I still do design work, but it's balanced now with the creative fulfillment of my art. Mom comes to dinner once a month, either at our house or at a restaurant. She's rebuilding her relationship with Riley, trying to be the grandmother she wishes she'd been from the start. She still sees Victoria. Family is complicated, and I don't expect Mom to cut off her daughter. But Mom now recognizes the toxicity of Victoria's behavior, and she no longer asks me to accommodate it. Victoria and I don't speak. There's been no dramatic final confrontation, no moment of reckoning. Just a gradual divergence of paths until we're living entirely separate lives. I've heard through Mom that Victoria tells people I'm difficult and cut off the family over nothing. I don't correct the narrative. Let her tell whatever story she needs to tell. I ran into Gregory last month at a coffee shop downtown. He looked uncomfortable but approached me anyway. Marcus, hey. How are you? Good, I said honestly. Really good. You? Fine, fine. He shifted his weight awkwardly. Look, I know things are weird with you and Victoria. I just wanted to say, I think you were right. At that dinner, the way she arranged things, the way she treated you and Riley. It wasn't right. Thanks for saying that, I said, surprised. Yeah, well. He shrugged. For what it's worth, I've tried to talk to her about it. She doesn't see it. Maybe she can't see it. But I wanted you to know that not everyone in the family thinks you were wrong. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Validation from an unexpected source. Riley asked me recently, Dad, do you ever regret how things turned out with Aunt Victoria? I thought about it carefully. I regret that we couldn't have the relationship I wished we could have, I said. I regret that she couldn't see me as someone worth respecting. But do I regret standing up for us? Not for a second. Good, Riley said. Because I think we're better off without her. I think we're better off being around people who actually like us. And that's the truth I've learned through all of this. Family isn't just who you're related to. Family is who shows up. Who treats you with dignity. Who celebrates your successes rather than diminishing them. Who makes space for you at the table, literally and metaphorically. Carlos and Michelle became family. Sophia's warm, boisterous siblings became family. The community of artists I've connected with became family. These are the people who see me, value me, champion me. And Riley is my North Star, the reason I had the courage to finally say enough. Watching her grow up without the weight of Victoria's toxicity, seeing her confidence and creativity flourish, knowing she'll enter adulthood with a clear understanding that she deserves respect, that's everything. Sometimes I think about that first dinner at Nouveau, the one where Victoria tried to humiliate us and instead accidentally gave us the push we needed to break free. I think about the elaborate dessert, the kindness of strangers, the moment when I realized I didn't have to accept cruelty just because it came from family. That dinner changed everything. Not because it was dramatic or explosive, but because it was the first time I chose myself and Riley over Victoria's expectations. It was the first time I said, "This isn't okay, and I'm not going to pretend it is." Everything that followed, the art career, the new relationships, the boundaries, the peace, all of it stemmed from that one decision to stay and eat dessert instead of slinking away in shame. People ask me sometimes if I think Victoria will ever change, if we'll ever reconcile. And the truth is, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I'm not waiting for her to change. I'm not holding my breath for an apology that will probably never come. I'm not organizing my life around her approval or disapproval. I'm just living, creating, loving, building a life that feels authentic and joyful. Teaching Riley that respect isn't negotiable, that family should build you up rather than tear you down, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your worth. And if Victoria ever does have a genuine change of heart, if she ever develops the capacity for real reflection and accountability, my door isn't permanently closed. But it's not standing open either. It's a door with a lock, and she'd need to do real work to earn the key. For now though, I'm content with the family I've chosen and the life I've built. I'm content with Riley's laughter, Sophia's steady presence, Mom's gradual healing, and the community of people who show up for us without needing to diminish us first. I'm content with the knowledge that I don't need Victoria's approval to know I'm living a good life. And I'm especially content with the memory of that dessert, elaborate and beautiful and complimentary, and the way it symbolized something I'd forgotten, that I deserve good things. That Riley deserves good things. That we don't have to earn basic human dignity by being smaller or quieter or more accommodating. We just have to exist as ourselves and trust that the right people will see us and value us accordingly. The wrong people will make us fight for scraps at their table. The right people will give us the best seat in the house. Epilogue. Last week, Riley came home from school with a piece of mail addressed to her. It was from the Youth Division of the State Arts Council. She'd won a regional competition for young artists, with a $5,000 scholarship and a showcase at the state capitol. We celebrated at Nouveau, of course. Carlos and Michelle had become something like godparents to Riley over the years, cheering her on at every milestone. They closed the restaurant early and hosted a private celebration for our chosen family, Sophia's siblings, Mom, our closest friends, and the community of artists who'd watched Riley grow up. Michelle made a toast to Riley, who learned from her father that sometimes the greatest art is living authentically, even when people try to make you feel small. And to Marcus, who taught all of us that dignity isn't something you beg for, it's something you claim. I looked around the room at the people who'd shown up for us, who'd created space for us to be fully ourselves, and I felt something I'd been chasing my whole life: belonging. Not belonging that required me to shrink or perform or earn. Just belonging. Simple and unconditional and real. Riley gave a speech thanking everyone for their support. At the end, she said, "My dad taught me that you can't control how people treat you, but you can control whether you accept it. He taught me that walking away from people who hurt you isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. And he taught me that the family that matters is the family that shows up. So thank you all for showing up, tonight and always." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later, as we were leaving, Carlos pulled me aside. "You know that first night you came here," he said, "when your sister excluded you from the private room?" "Of course," I said. "That was the night everything changed." "Michelle and I talk about that night sometimes," Carlos said. "About how a small act of kindness, just giving you a good table and treating you with respect, became part of something bigger. We like to think we played a small role in your journey." "Small," I repeated. "Carlos, you and Michelle showed me what it looks like when people actually value you. You gave me a template for what I deserved. That wasn't a small thing. That was everything." He smiled. "Well, you took that template and built a whole life from it. That's the real magic." As Sophia, Riley, and I walked to the car that night, the city lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets just like they had that first night years ago, I felt grateful. Not grateful for Victoria's cruelty. I don't believe in the narrative that abuse makes you stronger or that trauma is a gift. But grateful for the moment when I finally said no, grateful for the people who supported that choice, and grateful for the life that became possible once I stopped trying to earn love from people who were determined not to give it. Riley linked her arm through mine. "Dad." "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm really glad we left that dinner at Aunt Victoria's." "Me too, Riley. Me too." And that's how you break free. Not with a dramatic explosion or a perfect speech or a moment of cinematic revenge, but with 1,000 small choices to value yourself, to surround yourself with people who see you clearly, and to build a life that doesn't require permission from people who've already proven they won't give it. You order the dessert. You accept the compliment. You believe you deserve good things. And slowly, choice by choice, you become someone who knows their worth. Not theoretically, not aspirationally, but as a lived truth that nobody can take away. That's the real story. Not the humiliation at the table or the spectacular dessert or even the dramatic confrontations that followed. The real story is what happened next. A life built on dignity, surrounded by love, rooted in the unshakable knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am. And no family dinner, no matter how exclusive, will ever convince me otherwise again.